Hey, it's Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader, and welcome to another Black Belt Leadership Podcast where each week I'm giving you tips, tools, insights, and resources to help you become a better version of who you are and what you do as you discover, develop, and deploy your own Black Belt leader within. One of my friends shared a very humorous but true story, believe it or not, a true story that serves as a perfect setup for this week's leadership lesson, the DIY dilemma. Let me share this humorous story and let's jump right in to today's lesson. Now, one of my friends was recently visiting a friend in Northwest Arkansas. This friend owned a body shop. Now, why was my friend in Northwest Arkansas visiting a body shop? Because the guy that owned the body shop was also an incredible local tour guide when it came to trout fishing. Now, my friend from Texas loves trout fishing. And when he's got an opportunity to go to Northwest Arkansas and throw some line in the water, he absolutely eats it up. And he's going to go to the body shop and he's going to entice this man to either close the shop or schedule it on the weekend so these two guys have a chance to go. This man literally knows how to read the river. And when you're out with him, you're going to catch your limit of trout. Now, my friend tells me that his tour guide is absolutely uncanny when it comes to his ability on the water. One of these days, I'm going to go with him so I can experience that myself. But first, I've got to learn how to do fly fishing. As my friend was telling me this story, he was meeting with his friend and they were discussing the weekend's upcoming fishing plans and where they were going to go, what time they were going to leave, type of bait they wanted to make sure they had, and all the appropriate flies and necessary gear. As they're having this conversation, an eccentric older man that everybody in the community knows barged into the body shop and he was holding his jaw. When asked what he needed, the eccentric old man replied to the body shop owner, "That dentist wanted too much money to pull my tooth, and I can't do it myself, so you're going to pull it for me." Now, now, looking at this eccentric old man, you would believe by the way he was dressed and what he drove that he probably couldn't afford to pay the dentist, but that's not the case. You wouldn't know it by looking at him, but this man was one of the wealthiest men in the county. But he was also known as a cantankerous, demanding, penny-pinching miser. Now, despite the unsanitary conditions of the body shop, and think about it, it's a body shop. This eccentric old man was dead set and insistent that his tooth was coming out right now, and that body shop in Northwest Arkansas is where it was going to happen. Now, after much arguing and debating, the shop owner finally relented. The old man wasn't going to leave till he got his tooth pulled, and the old man was making such a ruckus, nobody could get any work done. My friend was hoping something would happen so they could finish making their plans and he could go back to the hotel. And to my friend's surprise, this shop owner went over to his workbench, grabbed a pair of nasty pliers, never bothered to clean them. He set the old man down in a chair in the corner of the shop, covered it up with some plastic drop cloth, and he went to work. That's right. He went to work. The old man opened his mouth wide and pointed out the bad tooth. The shop owner leaned up and put a knee on the man's chest, reached into the man's mouth, squeezed the pliers around the tooth, and started yanking and pulling. After a few moments of struggle, the shop owner staggered backwards, still holding the pliers with tooth in hand, as blood began to gush out of this old man's mouth, down that plastic drip cloth, and onto the floor of the body shop. Everybody there was in the middle of shock and awe, wondering what in the world was going to happen next. For a few minutes, the eccentric old man, he just sat there motionless in the chair with his head still leaning back. My friend wondered if the old man had passed out. Then, to everyone's shock and amazement, the old man sat up, removed the plastic drip cloth from around his neck, stood to his feet, thanked the shop owner for his time, and walked out of the shop, got in his beat-up truck, and drove away, spitting blood out the window as he turned onto the highway. Now, this eccentric old miser had faced a DIY dilemma. And what did he do? He found a way out of it. But to solve his DIY dilemma, the problem that he faced, he needed help. He couldn't do it on his own. And that's the subject of today's Leadership Insight in the Black Belt Leadership Podcast. So you may say, John, what in the world can we take away from that crazy true story? Well, here's what we can take away from that. You and I, we all face obstacles. We face struggles. We face challenges as we go through life. Now, many of these issues that we deal with, we can work out on our own. We can work through whatever it is we're facing and get to the other side. But sometimes, and maybe a lot of the time, we can't by ourselves. There's times when we simply have to swallow our stubborn pride, push past our ego, and seek the help of other people. This is the DIY dilemma. What do I mean by that? Sometimes we can't fix ourselves. Sometimes we can, but a lot of times we can't. Sometimes you can fix yourself, other times you can't. Sometimes you can fix yourself by yourself, but other times to fix yourself, you need a helping hand, like this eccentric old miser in Northwest Arkansas. You and I, we all face a DIY dilemma at some point in our time. Now, think about it for a minute. Think about the person you are right now. How did you get to this point in your life? Did you do it all by yourself? Well, of course not. There's a lot of things you learn to do. Some things were self-taught. We've taught ourselves skills and talents and abilities and ideas that we've developed on our own. But if we want to be honest and we go back and look, many of the skills and talents and thoughts and ideas that you and I have developed that are part of who we are and what we do, those are the result of somebody else that contributed in some way to our lives. Early on, it was our parents and maybe siblings, grandparents, and other family members. Maybe it was a school teacher. Maybe it was a Sunday school teacher. Maybe it was a pastor or a rabbi. Other people in our communities contributed to our lives in some way. But how often do we take that for granted? There's no such thing as a self-made man, and that's a lesson that every single one of us has to learn, and the sooner we learn it, the better. Again, there's no such thing as a self-made man or a self-made woman. We are the sum total of the people that have poured into our lives. So that begs the question, why in the world are we so desperate to try to do it all by ourselves? Why don't we ask for help more often? Why don't we ask for help sooner? Why do we continue to stumble and fall on our own, trying to do it all by ourselves rather than seek the guidance and wisdom and counsel of other people who could actually help us succeed and succeed in record time? To me, the reason we do that is we let our stubborn pride and ego get in the way. There's an ancient proverb that if you summarize it, it says, pride comes before a fall. And there's a lot of truth to that statement. My mom told me growing up, she says, be very careful not to be so proud with your nose in the air, you don't recognize the person that's about to pull the rug out from underneath you. There's a lot of truth in that statement too. But think about that proverb. Pride comes before a fall. It's true. When we think too highly of ourselves, we forget that who we are is because of the other people. Countless numbers of people that have contributed to our lives in some way. The individuals, the unsung heroes that have spoken into our lives, that have leaned into our lives, that have contributed to our lives, that have molded and made us who we are. I find it interesting that you and I tend to value the things we've done for ourselves more than we value the things that other people have done for us. But we wouldn't be who we are without those other people. So if we're really honest with ourselves, the things that other people have done to mold and to make us into the individual that we are far outweighs all the things that you or I have accomplished on our own. As I thought about this DIY dilemma, two individuals came to mind in history that failed when they faced their own DIY dilemma. The first is Alexander Hamilton. You pull out a $10 bill and whose picture is there? Alexander Hamilton. Well, why is he there? Alexander Hamilton was the Secretary of the Treasury, very first one. That's why he's on the $10 bill. Now, this individual, Hamilton, should have been one of our greatest national heroes. He was a Revolutionary War hero, and he went on to become George Washington's chief of staff at the young age of 22. I already mentioned that he was the very first Secretary of the Treasury, and he was one of the co-authors of the Federalist Papers. He designed the nation's banking and tax system. But Hamilton had a problem. What was it? He believed he was a self-made man. His pride and his ego caused him to think more highly of himself and his accomplishments than those around him and the people that contributed to make him the man that he was. As a result of his pride and his arrogance and his ego, he alienated all the people around him because he believed he could do it alone. This was Hamilton's DIY dilemma. And because he lacked humility and possessed an overinflated belief in himself, he was unwilling to overlook even the slightest insult or derogatory comment. And when Aaron Burr demanded an apology for comments made by Harrison, his pride and ego said no. Harrison refused to apologize for words he had said, demeaning Burr in print. So what was the result? Burr challenged Hamilton to a duel where Hamilton was mortally wounded and died. His DIY dilemma didn't end well. Now, the second individual that comes to mind is General George Custer. Now, you probably recognize the name if you're a history buff. He was a flamboyant and ambitious officer in the United States military. His early military exploits were the stuff of legend, and his ego grew with each and every successful campaign that he pulled off. Now, as a result of all of his early successes in the military, Custer grew to have a very highly inflated opinion of his military prowess. He believed he couldn't make a bad military decision. And as a result of his overinflated ego, Custer believed that he knew better than the seasoned veterans around him, many who had served much longer than he had, and he refused to listen to his experienced scouts and his fellow officers. And as a result of that, he led his troop, his battalion, into a battle that cost them everything. This ego and this pride was Custer's DIY dilemma. Now, history tells us that Custer wanted to be the man, and he forgot to learn the lesson that there is no self-made man. He failed to appreciate the individuals who had molded and made him and helped him be successful. And as a result of that, he rejected the warnings of those experienced soldiers that he had previously relied on to achieve success in battle. Custer's overconfidence, fueled by his ego and his pride, led not only to his humiliation on the battlefield, but it also led to his death and the death of his entire battalion at the Battle of Bull Run. So what can we learn from Hamilton and what can we learn from Custer as it relates to the DIY dilemma we're all going to face at some point in our lives, and probably more than once, and maybe more often than we want? Now, both of these men stopped in the process of transformation. They believed they had become the end-all, be-all, and their personal growth journey was complete. They had forgotten, as a matter of fact, hadn't been spoken yet, but they had not learned the lesson that we've learned from Ray Kroc. As long as you're green, you're growing. But once you're ripe, you start to rot. Their inflated pride, their stubborn ego caused them to forget that all of us, you and I, every single one of us, remains under construction. We have become who we are because of the people who helped us when we were unwilling or unable to help ourselves. Let me say that again. You and I, we have become who we are because of the people who helped us when we were unwilling or unable to help ourselves. You know, we've got to be willing to admit there's a lot of things we can do, but there's just as many things we can't do. There's a lot of things that we do very well, but there's an even greater number of things that we do okay or not good at all, and that's where we need the help of other people. You and I, we need other people who can do what we're not best at doing. And we definitely need other people who can do what we don't know how to do or the things we prefer not to do. By the same token, we need other people who are further along the same road we're traveling to be willing to let them share their lessons learned so we can glean from their insights of success and failure without having to go through the same things they went through to learn those lessons. You know, it's a fact of nature that a seed only grows in the right environment. A seed by itself can do nothing. It requires the right soil, the right nutrients, and the right amount of light and moisture and time. Now, the same is true for you and for me. You and I, we need other people. There is no self-made man or self-made woman. So let me share a practical example of what I mean as I get ready to kind of move to the close of this week's lesson. Who doesn't want to lose a few pounds? Maybe an inch or two around the waist. Truth be told, probably most of us. My friend Wayne Nance, the founder of Real Life Management, says America is the fattest, most health conscious nation on earth. We could all stand to lose a few pounds. Now, when it comes to losing those few pounds or those few inches, there are some things that you and I can do on our own. We can cut calories. We can exercise. We can get more rest. We can drink more water. We can eat less junk food. Those are things we can do by ourselves. But what about changing those habits? What about changing those beliefs? What about changing those behaviors that are driving the obesity that has put on a few more inches and a few more pounds than what we probably want to admit? Sometimes we can deal with those habits, beliefs, and behaviors on our own. Other times we can't. That's where we need the help of other people. Now, that help could come in the form of a book, an app on our phone, a course that we take online, a program that we sign up for, or it could come from a coach or an accountability partner. It could come from the individual at the gym that we finally yield to and say, okay, I need you to help me do the things I'm unwilling or unable to do by myself. As a result of that, when we rely on others to get the help we need to accomplish what we can't do on our own, we're capable of saying, doing, and becoming more. But here's the problem. If we're unwilling to ask for help, if we're unwilling to seek the guidance and wisdom of those who are more gifted in this area than we are, guess what? We end up talking the talk and not walking the walk. And the inches we want to lose stay there, and we may add to it. And the pounds we want to lose keep hanging there, and perhaps we add to that. And rather than getting thinner, we end up getting fatter. This is our DIY dilemma. And that's just one example of where we can help ourselves to a point, but to really get to where we ultimately want to be, oftentimes we need the help of other people. Think about it this way. When you're in a maze, if you've ever been in a corn maze or done anything like that, it's a challenging proposition. But if you find yourself in a maze, you can see where you are, but you can't see ultimately to where you want to go. It's trial and error until hopefully you find your way to the exit. You may get out in a few minutes, or you may be there for hours. But when someone has already successfully navigated the maze many times, or someone is strategically positioned above the maze where they can see the entire maze itself, that person can render aid, assistance, and guidance that can help you get from where you are to where you want to be a whole lot easier. So let's wrap this up and bring it to a conclusion. Here's what I want to leave you with. When you're facing a DIY moment, you're in that DIY dilemma trying to decide, do I do it myself or do I ask for help? You got a choice you got to make. And here's the choice. You can keep trying to do it all by yourself, or you can let go of your stubborn pride and your ego and accept the help of those who have wisdom, guidance, and insight that you don't have in that moment, and learn from their experience. There are people that are willing, ready, and able to help you do, become, and accomplish more than you're doing right now if you, when you face your DIY dilemma, you open yourself up to the help of other people. So I want to challenge you. Don't be a Hamilton. Don't be a Custer. It didn't end well for either one of them. And if you decide to do it all by yourself and you think you are a self-made man or a self-made woman, things might not end well for you as well. Now, it's probably not going to be a duel to the death, but it could cost you a relationship, a career, or something equally valuable. Sometimes you need an expert. Sometimes you need a guide. Sometimes you need a coach. Other times you need a mentor. And sometimes you just need a friend. So if you find yourself in a DIY dilemma, do these three things. Number one, admit it. Number two, own it. And number three, fix it. Now, 1 and 2 are somewhat easy. You already know it. So admit this is one of those things you can't do by yourself and own that fact. Be willing to ask for help. And that's where that third step comes in, and it's a little bit harder. Being willing to fix it, asking for help is going to require that you get your stubborn pride and ego out of the way. Because it's only then that you can seek the guidance, wisdom, and advice of others and be willing to accept it. Getting your pride and ego out of the way is going to require that you open yourself up to another individual who may tell you what you don't want to hear, who may show you what you don't want to see, or teach you what you don't want to learn, so that by doing these things, you become a better version of yourself than you are right now. This is how you overcome the DIY dilemma. Hey, I'm Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.